First off, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Kyle Simpson, I'm 24 years old, and I'm a heroin addict. Growing up, I had every advantage: a supportive family, a white middle class upbringing, and a private school education. As long as I can remember, I've been happy. I love skateboarding and music and being around people. But I also love drugs. It started as an innocuous curiosity, an interest in expanding my framework of understanding, and a way to escape the monotony of small-town boredom. When I was introduced to opiates, however, that curiosity morphed into something more insidious. I moved from my hometown in Southern California to attend a liberal arts college in the bohemian mecca of Southern Oregon. I felt free and alive, and I spent my time studying and traveling and taking drugs. Like most opiate users, I started by taking prescriptions lifted from medicine cabinets by me and my close friends. I learned how to freebase Oxycontin, and as the price of pills increased, I switched to black tar heroin. Shortly after my 21st birthday, I was arrested and put into jail. My parents helped me get a lawyer and go through residential treatment, and I was able to transition comfortably into recovery. I have now been clean off drugs and alcohol for 3 years, and have accomplished more than I ever thought possible, from graduating college to speaking about addiction, and to helping other addicts get on the path to recovery. So many addicted Americans do not have access to the treatment and resources that I've been given. I wanted to find out why. In creating this film, I set out to question the systems in place which are antiquated and unfit to treating one of the largest public health problems which faces our society today.
Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
Getting hooked on painkillers is an expensive habit. Many now turning to a cheaper way to chase that high with heroin. Tonight, we take you inside the epidemic.
America is facing an epidemic of addiction to opioids.
Heroin epidemic.
And I'd say, what's your biggest problem? And they'd always say heroin.
Authorities found prescription opioid medication on his person.
Opioid addiction is killing nearly 30,000 Americans a year.
Every 19 minutes, someone dies from an accidental drug overdose.
2.6 million Americans were addicted to them.
159 million prescriptions written for opioid painkillers. Nearly enough for every American adult and child to have their own bottle of pills.
Jackson County is currently on the forefront of the battle against opiate addiction. I went directly to the people who are on the front lines, from health specialists to parents to law enforcement and treatment professionals, to figure out how this problem was created, what we are doing to fix it, and how it affects those who are touched by this disease.
What I learned right away in coming to Jackson County was that there's a much bigger drug problem than I had previously heard about.
The hottest place for drugs in the world, I think, right here in Jackson County, that people don't realize. It's the smaller counties in the United States that have a larger per capita drug problem. Jackson County is right up Oregon, which is one of the highest drug using states in the country.
We rank fourth in the United States for our drug use.
This is an epidemic of major proportions.
Addiction is our #1 public health problem among adolescents.
So we see an emerging number of youth who are using opioids, and in fact, it's growing. The trend line is almost straight up.
It's the human condition to want to avoid pain. So that's really beneficial if you're a pharmaceutical company and you have the ability to make a medication that provides some anesthesia, if you will, from all different kinds of pain.
What does science tell us about the treatment of pain? And I think what we've learned is that opioids are generally inappropriate for most people who have simple chronic pain.
What needed to happen was a cultural shift around how we see pain. We, as a society, changed the way we look at pain, and therefore that pain was something to be gotten rid of, and then miraculously we have a drug to do that. So it all was perfect, especially for the pharmaceutical bottom line.
So I'm an addict, and you could take me with like some random person off the street who's not an addict, and you could give us an injection of morphine every day for a month. And the difference between me and that person is that after that month, and we both go through withdrawals, and we go through kind of the horror of withdrawals, that person is not going to go back to using opiates again, but I am, because I'm an addict. And so I think there's something for us to look at there. We see that there's this physiological dependence, but there's this difference between an addict and a person who is physically dependent upon it.
Opiates by nature, they actually cause something called dependence, which is where if you take something or put something into your body and then suddenly stop, you're going to feel the effects of that.
They're the people that are getting addicted to pain medication, coming in through doctor's offices and developing dependence on it because of some legitimate acute or chronic pain condition. And all of us have been learning more and more that pain medication is not an effective strategy and has a whole lot of risks associated with it.
Prescription drug issue where people get legitimate prescriptions for real physical ailments, become addicted, and then doctor shop, and then they get cut off or restricted, and the prescription drugs available illegally are really, really expensive, and heroin is really, really cheap.
People would come to me in pain. I kind of bought that story that we weren't being compassionate enough. I wanted to be at the front of the compassion line, right? Because I was a good guy. And so I would hear people, I'd believe them, I'd give them opioids. They'd come back and tell me what a great doctor I was and how much better they felt. And pretty soon people are coming from far and wide to come see me because I was the most compassionate guy in town. And I didn't realize that I was being taken advantage of, that I didn't really know, I didn't really understand the drug. I didn't really understand the hold that it had on people, and that folks could get into a place where they would say almost anything, do almost anything, to avoid getting dope sick. I didn't know it, didn't get it. Well, at some point, I got a phone call from a parent who said, my kid is addicted to pills that you are prescribing to somebody else, and I just thought you ought to know that, and I didn't know that. I was treating a patient with cancer with huge doses of pain pills, and those pills were being siphoned off by the family and being sold. And so I thought it was a simple mistake. And I called the board of medical examiners, who called me up, and in the process they showed me that I was inappropriately treating opioids, not just to this guy, but to a dozen other patients. And in addition to showing me, they said, you can't prescribe pain meds for a year. You can't do it. And so as patients would come in to see me, I would say to them, I can't prescribe for you. And I'd sort of see the interaction, I'd see how they behaved, I'd see how suddenly a whole segment of the clinic kind of didn't come in anymore. I internalized the message so that over time I was able to say to my patients, I won't prescribe for you. This isn't safe for you. I will not do this, as opposed to somebody's making me not prescribe. So over the period of a year, I kind of got it. Since that time, I feel like I went on a process of educating myself, and then a whole lot of information became available. But by the time I got this job, I feel like I already understood the power of opioids and how hard it is for physicians to say no to patients.
I think what it started with is you have doctors, physicians, who want to treat pain. And you read some articles that say pain is the fifth vital sign. And they don't want to leave people hurting. And so there was this push to just prescribe all these opiate painkillers. They were cheap. Big pharma is they're consistently, making these longer lasting ones, these higher dosing ones. And so, I think it was easy for the doctors and to just write a prescription. And we're a society like that. People think when something's wrong with them, health-wise or medically-wise, you go and a pill should fix everything. Unfortunately, that really doesn't work. And then When they ran out of their prescriptions and they could no longer get prescriptions, people started reaching out to heroin. It was cheap, it was potent, it was easy to get.
Just because you have a mental health problem doesn't mean you're a criminal, but a lot of times people with drug addictions and mental health problems end up committing crimes.
I started here in 1995 and we had a huge meth problem, which continues to this day. And opiates weren't really even on the radar. Then fast forward, I had various assignments, and then in 2011 I go back to work drugs as a task force commander, supervising it. And we've got this huge heroin issue. I mean, where we're seeing, regular cases where we're hitting folks with an ounce or two of heroin, which was unheard of back in 2001.
I think the war on drugs has had a really big impact on addicts and addiction and treatment in a really negative way. We know that the U.S. jail and prison system is the largest treatment provider of mental illness and addiction in the country. So that's not working. That's clearly not working.
We have space for 230 inmates, and we're normally at that capacity.
And how many of those inmates are specifically serving time for drug charges?
That varies because the population changes so fast. There have been studies done nationwide in other jails where it's estimated 70 to 80% of the inmate population has some type of substance abuse, or there's some type of substance involved, be it alcohol or drugs. And now we're starting to see a lot more heroin use than we had in the past.
Oregon right now is sitting on roughly 23% of our criminals in our prison have addiction issues first. And so what are we doing about that, and how are we treating that? And is prison the answer to the addiction? And we look at the balance when there's criminal aspects involved with the addiction. Is it the addiction that leads to the criminality, or is it truly they're criminal and by the way they happen to be an addict?
I've put people in jail before just to keep them from using, because frankly I was afraid they were going to die. I was afraid they were in a massive heroin or meth or both runner, and it was scary. And and they were, I've had women who've been sexually assaulted, who've been, I've had people who've been the victims of crime, who've been assaulted when they're, involved in that lifestyle. It's dangerous lifestyle, and I've had people in my treatment courts that I have put in jail for what I believe to be their own safety. But when I'm doing a punitive thing, it's probably going to be like a 2-day sentence. When I'm doing something more because I'm worried about the person and I'm concerned about their risks and safety, it may be longer than that, because I want to protect them and I want to get them clean and sober. And sometimes, unfortunately, jail is the only option we have.
When it comes to services, a lot of times jail becomes the default, whether it's for mental health reasons or drugs, and that default is a lack of housing. Because what happens a lot of times is they'll come to the jail, and that may be enough to get them out of the cycle or to start the road to rehab. And then when they get released, they go back to the same neighborhood, the same problem area, because that's their resource area. They don't have anywhere else to go. And then you get around the same friends, you get around the same maybe temptations, and you're back into this cycle because of your addiction. Opposed to getting out and getting into an environment that is a safer, more healthy environment where people can have the residency or the house to be able to prosper. And I would say that is a resource that is improving in Jackson County, but we need more of. We need that full wraparound service to where once they do come into the jail or are released, there's that place that someone can go to extend that rehabilitation, to extend that positive environment.
If you look at countries like Portugal, they have legalized all drugs, and Switzerland has done the same. So if somebody gets caught with heroin or something like that, or some type of an opiate, as opposed to saying like you have a certain amount of time in jail or whatever, they're giving the option to go to treatment instead, which I think is a much more effective way of looking at it, and also that it's not going to go on somebody's record or prevent somebody from getting a job, which is going to just set them up for failure for the rest of their life.
For me, it is about looking at what motivates human behavior. And forever we've had a punishment model, which means that, in my view, as a behaviorist, if Once the punishing agent is out of the person's life, they revert to the old behavior. Jails show that. We want to keep people happy and grateful for where they are. But what we know about humans is there's no greater pain than self-loathing. Nobody can hate you as well as you hate yourself. And there's no greater motivation than believing you can overcome that. Not having somebody else accept you, but having you accept yourself.
Treatment has always been underserved, and there's not enough treatment resources for people who even want treatment. Only 1 out of every 24 people who want and need treatment for, say, opiates can access treatment. We don't have enough programs, we don't have enough resources put into those programs, and a lot of the programs are just staggering with old models of addiction and trying to treat new problems and new situations with systems that won't work in today's addiction community. Here in Jackson County, we only have about 2 or 3 places you can go to for treatment. And when it comes to opiate, the ARC is trying hard. We've opened a detox. It's the only medical detox between, pretty sure, Sacramento and Eugene. So within a close to 500-mile radius, there are medical aspects to address when a heroin addict is in withdrawal, is trying to get off of their drugs, and they should be addressed medically and with medications that won't perpetuate the addiction, but will allay the symptoms and help them engage in treatment.
I think it's about what do you need, not what have you done, and how can we help. My goal is to have people understood as people, not as the disease they represent. And so to the extent we can understand them as human beings and recognize that they're trying to accomplish something, they're adapting to something in a non-adaptive, non-good way, and if we as people, as community, can say, what are you trying to accomplish and how can we do it better and how can we help? I think we'll get much better outcomes. And the second part to that, and once they've done that hard work, embrace them. Don't always brand them with their past. Give them a chance at the future, because if we don't, there's no incentive to continue to go.
There's actually, I think, more medications in development to treat addiction than there are to treat any other medical condition, as more and more of the medical society has adopted addiction as a true medical entity since 2008. We have a law in 2008 signed by President George W. Bush called the Addiction Equity Act that says that addiction is not a moral weakness, it's not a criminal intent, it's not a matter of willpower or choice, but an actual medical disorder, not unlike diabetes, hypertension, thyroid, that only affects certain people. Not everybody who uses heroin will get addicted to heroin. Not everybody who's ever tried alcohol will have an alcohol problem, but a certain percent do, because they have anomalies or they have differences in their biology that robs them of their ability to control their use of that substance. And with that, there's all these medical developments into helping addicts deal with their condition so that they can have a better and healthier lifestyle. Addiction is a chronic, persistent disorder. We don't cure diabetes, we manage it. We don't cure hypertension, we manage it. We don't cure addiction, we manage it.
Everybody's different. People get well, and I love doing the work.
I have natural endogenous opioids that I release that give me that sense of well-being. We are hardwired to do certain things that give us pleasure. You know, sex feels good so that we can reproduce the species. Eating or drinking after you've been thirsty or hungry feels good. Taking care and loving somebody else, right? Those are deep, deep, deep things. And we've got this whole mechanism in our body for that. When that gets hijacked by exogenous opioids in high doses for a long period of time, we are mucking around with something that is very, very fundamental. If people wonder why heroin addicts do the things they do, oh my God, they aren't taking care of their kids. You haven't eaten for days. You know, you did never act like this before. You know, it's because we've hijacked that primitive, basic, fundamental system.
Addiction impacts in the most vulnerable people we have in our society, addiction, are our most valuable possessions. They're the most intelligent, the most sensitive, the most aware, the most creative. They're people with great value.
I recall speaking to a mother who had come from Europe to help her daughter detox. Her daughter was using both heroin and methamphetamines. And she said, you know, she's detoxing at home. I'm here with her. She's doing really well, but she needs to get into a treatment program right away, on Monday, preferably. What can you offer, you know? And I said, absolutely nothing before 5 or 6 weeks. And she couldn't believe it. I mean, she'd come from Europe, right, to help support her daughter. And she said, you know, I would be better off to get her on a plane, to get her some methadone and get her on a plane and go back to England where she could be in treatment on Monday morning. And I said, then that's what you should do.
My kid has a disease. The disease has taken him down pathways that I never would have wanted him to have seen, let alone participate in. And as a parent, you feel like they're pulling you down that drive with them. He was in 10th grade when there was an issue of having a really bad reaction to experimenting with mushrooms and taking him to the ER, having his stomach pumped and having charcoal. And at that point it was the, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I found out at that point from him that he had been smoking marijuana and that he had tried this. So he had opened kind of Pandora's boxes, I think of it. So throughout high school, I didn't see or experience much more of that type of behavior. It seems some of the friends that he was connecting with weren't always the people that I wanted him to be with. When he hit the university level is when I would say all hell broke loose. There was a house arrest component involved in it versus being in jail, and I was open to that. He hadn't been living at home. But it's like, yeah, okay, you can come home and you can have the monitor, and I'd rather have you here than there. Was washing clothes, and in his pocket of his shorts after going through the wash, I pulled out a baggie and there were these pills that were kind of a sage green color. I asked him about it, and he's like, oh, those are my vitamins for working out. And I truly believed in that because there was no coding or description on them anymore. It had been washed away. Later I found out they were Oxy, and things really escalated. Within a period of about 2.5 years after drug court, by that point he had graduated, to using heroin by needle. And then of course finding out that he is Hep C positive, and just knowing as a 27-year-old young man the health issues that he has. And maybe because I've lost a child and had to bury one, that I don't want to lose another one, especially to this disease, not on my watch. And I'm willing to put whatever I have into making it happen. It's far easier when he's working with me than against me. But again, you know, if it means him in jail or him in prison or him in recovery, however many times, maybe we'll be talking about, you know, the 50th time he went to recovery. It really worked that time. I don't know. I never want to give up hope.
I'm Rebecca Peterson. I am the mother of Christopher Thomas Bales, who died in 2010 on St. Patrick's Day of an accidental overdose. Some of the things I saw were so much like normal growing up things that even if they were signs, it was really hard to tell that they were, because you know, if you look at some of the signs of certain kinds of drug use, it's also signs of being a teenager. So he had mood swings, but he was always a really sensitive child. I think he started using heroin when he moved to Portland. I didn't think so because he talked about the junkies around the apartment that he would see, and he would talk about them with such contempt. I've seen a lot of things that he wrote after the fact, and they are obsessive about drugs. It clearly became the most important thing in his life and the thing he thought about all the time. It's been 6 years now. I do sometimes laugh and enjoy myself. I play Chris's guitar. I have a happy marriage and a good job. I have a daughter and 2 stepdaughters, and I love them all and have hope for their futures. But I have a broken heart, and I feel that every single day. I will never get over it.
This journey has taught me a lot about opiate addiction. I've learned that we've barely scraped the surface of this problem in Jackson County. I learned about the complex of pain and how widely mistreated it is, with dangerous painkillers being overprescribed and falling into the hands of innocent people. As the amount of opiate prescriptions grow, so does tolerance, creating a threshold of dependence, which leads to crime and dangerous street drugs to maintain drug habits. Instead of being met with help from the community resources, addicts are thrust into a cycle of incarceration and shame for their addiction, both progressing their illness and damaging their community. It's been heartbreaking, talking to people like Judge Greif, who try and curb this problem by locking up individuals just to keep them from their harmful behaviors. Or speaking with treatment providers who don't have enough room in their programs to help everyone who even wants treatment. I've spoken with mothers who've watched their children spiral out of control in deadly ways. When I started this project, I wanted answers. I wanted to expose this issue and offer a solution, but it is clear that one person cannot do all of that. What needs to happen next is a cultural shift. Once we begin to accept addiction into our society and treat addicts with compassion and medical treatment, only then can we begin curbing the harm caused by opiates.
Don't know just where I'm going.